Lorenzo, thanks for taking time. Fantastic to be chatting with you, mate.
Pleasure.
So you've been producing the Transformers movies right from the start. Are you as excited about Rise of the Beast as you were back in 2007?
There's an ebb and flow when you think about, 16 years. It's crazy to me. Because really it started around 204, 205 where we were developing it and everything. So it's really like 17, 18 years. I have to say, each time there's a different thing that gets you excited.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it's in this case, having the beast is so great and so fresh and so different. And Bumblebee was trying to do intimate, and so each time we're finding these things that are keeping us interested, and hopefully we can translate that to our audience.
It's amazing to think that like 30 years ago, big franchises meant diminished returns, smaller budgets, and now like they just keep getting bigger. Audiences can't get enough of them. So it's an exciting time. What can audiences expect from Rise of the Beast? How is this different from the rest?
Well, we did this with Bumblebee. We sort of recalibrated, right? We went intimate,
Yeah.
and the experience, the satisfaction of that experience carried forward. So when we went, and some fans were a little disappointed, not by the movie, but there was not enough giant spectacle for them. Okay.
Yeah.
Which we understood. It was a conscious thing to avoid giant spectacle. So what we were able to do as an approach was to say we don't want to lose the intimacy, but we want to reintroduce the spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our decision making in terms of like how should we approach this, and that led to a really unusual thing, which is both our human characters have character arcs, full character arcs, which other than really in the first movie, in a sense, when Shia turns from a young boy man to man,
Yep.
that's not really been available to the humans, if you would. But also we added an arc for Optimus, and we've never had an arc for a Transformer. And so what happens is you have three different characters, the three in many ways primary characters. They're all going like that with their arc, and there's tension because they have different objectives in a way as humans and as robots, although I think of the robots as humans. I've spent more time with them than most of my friends, so um, it creates an interesting tension in the movie. And then once they figure out all their individual things, the united aspect of it becomes really satisfying. So we were able to give an emotional context for the story that's very deep and movie long, and then we added the spectacle again.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I think it's also just the fact you tap into the Beast Wars universe. This is kind of what fans are sort of, really, really excited for. But you've got Stephen Capel Jr., if I'm pronouncing his name right.
That's
Not
right.
the most obvious choice for a Transformers movie. What
Now,
made him the right guy for this?
his work, I really liked Creed 2, but I'm what I saw in Creed 2 was a guy who understood commercial filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
What I saw in all of his work is an emotionality and a connection to character that was reflective of what we were trying to do with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came in, and the icing on the cake was he's a diehard Beast Wars fan.
Awesome.
And so the advantage when you have a director having such in a way, DNA inside of him being Beast Wars, it translates into the movie in a way that you can't articulate, but it's there. There's a comfort, there's a certainty of decision making that comes out of that when you own it that way.
Sure. And with him directing, this is obviously the second time that Michael Bay has not been in the director's chair. How does
Yep.
he go on set? Does he struggle to let go of the reins when he's sort of on set watching another director call the shots?
Michael doesn't come on set because of that. I think he's never articulated that, but no, Michael's there to help us. Michael, he's got one of the great eyes about visual effects and how to do a lot of this stuff, but he's a director first.
Yeah.
And so he comes to set, but he doesn't spend a lot of time on set. And frankly, I don't think any director would love to have another director of that significance sitting there on the set. It would just there's an awkwardness to that I don't think it would be helpful to filmmaking.
A massive intimidation for sure.
Well, there's an intimidation, and there's also it's sort of like, well, who's in charge? There's
Yeah.
just it's sort of like this is my set.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
so it's a little of both, I think.
No, that makes sense. And this film boasts a massive, massive cast, including a freshly crowned, Oscar winner. You got Michelle Yeoh in there as well, and
I know. Thank God.
everything
That's so
seems to
right.
have fallen into place with this cast. Um, when you were sort of, recruiting all of this talent, was the pandemic a factor in the pre-production of this?
Oh yeah, the pandemic got in the way of everything, but they were rushing for a date, so we didn't have as much prep as we normally had. More than anything, the pandemic threw a lot of curveballs at how you make a film.
Mm,
And going to foreign countries is never comfortable when you're worried about your health.
yep.
Just no matter what country you're from, you want to if you're going to get sick, you want to be in your own country, right? And so going to Peru with this whole crew, and Peru at the time was the highest COVID death rate in the world at this time there.
My God.
Um, and we were like 19 days in the jungle, so we were pretty far away from serious medical help. But thankfully, the vaccine had been introduced in time for us. But nonetheless, it created a lot of pressure.
Mm, yeah,
It's
for sure.
sort of like and then there's a lot of detail in trying to test everybody today and different all the stuff you have to go through.
A lot of uncertainty too. Um,
Yeah.
so when you're filming a big Hollywood production like this over in a place like that, how much of the crew is American? Do you have to rely on any local crew? Is there laws in place there for
Well,
requirements?
each country, what's been fun about the Transformers series is we've got to work with Egyptian crews, Jordan crews, French crews, British, like, and Peruvian now. Generally speaking, it depends on the country and the sophistication of the film industry. Like a big
Hmm.
surprise was Egypt they had such a phenomenally good crew. We didn't know what to expect one way or another. Peru doesn't have a big entertainment business, so they don't have a lot of crew. That
Yep.
said, one of our really important ADs, we had a couple ADs that were Peruvian that were really valued, so we had crew, and you have a lot of cast there. So you are absolutely integrating as much as you can of the locals,
Yeah.
and we had shot originally in Montreal, so we had Canadians, we had Americans, we had I don't think we had an Australian, which happened to be my wife.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. So I'm half Australian. That's what I always say now.
Awesome. Awesome. You're down with the
Um,
lingo.
yeah. In fact, I was in Byron Bay for this last Christmas, which was great.
Amazing. Yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome.
And,
Well, before I let you run, just want to ask you about the Hasbro universe. This is tapping
yeah.
into Beast Wars. Is this universe going to burst open to people moving forward? Will we see crossovers? What? You can't tell me too much, but what
No,
would
no,
the
no.
vision be?
Here's the truth. It's so hard to make one of these that we don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's next
Yeah.
because there's so much to try to make excellent now.
Yeah.
That said, we're absolutely talked about different kinds of crossovers. For instance, we talked about the Beasts for probably 2 or 3 movies. The trick with the Beasts was they're not like the Autobots where they can turn into a car and just sit in a city and they can, you know what I mean? So you had to
Yeah.
figure out a story
Hmm.
that could withhold them. And so what happened is, and we always try to take you on an adventure when we go to these on our movies, which is part of the fun of it, I think. When we were debating our story, we were like, well, if we go to Peru, I wanted to go to Machu Picchu, so I won that battle. We can introduce the beasts in the jungle because then they feel like, oh, there's a natural reason. One of the things that's hard in the past we've seen it, and in this one you've seen it. You think to yourself, okay, now that we're almost done this movie, now is when we begin to really think about what did we do here and what did it create. And there are always surprises, and in this case, Primal. I almost can't imagine a movie again, a Transformers movie without Primal.
Yeah.
It's such a cool character. So then you start saying to yourself, all right, if we do another movie, how do we put Primal into it? You know what I mean? And I always say Optimus and Bumblebee are sort of like Batman and Robin. What are you going to do? Make a Batman movie without Batman and Robin? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
so the trick is really trying to figure out how many characters can we hold.
Mhm.
You know, and for a long time, fans have been arguing for a GI Joe Transformers crossover, and we've talked about it, and we continue to talk about it. And we haven't found a way. It's sort of a long response, but trying to get you into our thinking. One of the interesting parts about this movie that's very successful is one of the things we set out to do was give each human a real purpose.
Yep.
And when you go back in the movies, and I'm not being critical of them, but we kept having a hard time figuring out. Well, you know, it's hard to compete a human with a 35-foot robot that has giant guns. Like, why? What can the human do?
Mm.
So we designed the movie to make sure the human's skill sets were imperative to the actual storytelling, so that they never feel like an add-on.
Yeah.
So now you got all, you know, imagine this. You think about your next movie. If you got to have Optimus, you got to have Bumblebee. When you see this movie, you're going to love Mirage. Mirage crushes. Pete Davidson was some of the smartest casting we've ever done. You know, again, surprise. We thought he'd be good. He knocks it out of the park.
Awesome.
Okay, now you got Primal. Now you got 4 already. How many characters can you really juggle? In my experience, is 6 or 7 is where you sort of run out, and you got to have a villain. So now you got 5.
Yep.
So now you're going to bring Anthony Ramos and Dominic Fish. You're now at 7. So you know what I mean. So that's part of the debate that goes on. Is like, if you fit too much, you don't get anything. You know what I mean. You don't get to know anybody. You don't get to invest in that way. And so even in this movie, Optimus gets the most airtime, if you would. Primal and Air Razor get the most airtime. Oh, actually, I say Optimus and Mirage get the most airtime as the Autobots. Air Razor and Primal get the most airtime. That's not to say the other characters aren't important, but you just can't give anybody any significance if you just try to divide it. So that's what happens. So as we think about the next movie, we're in a sense, we've got a feast of riches, but they're a burden, because like, how many can we put in this movie, and where are we going to all that? But we figure it out eventually.
Well, that speaks volumes for the integrity of the series, because that's what I was going to say. Is quite often when you get to a 6th or 7th installment in a franchise, the fatigue starts to set in with an audience. But in this case, it doesn't. And the way you did recalibrate with Bumblebee was just, you know, genius, if you will, because it really changed the style and the atmosphere of the franchise. So Bumblebee's certainly been my favorite. So I'm really looking forward to this new one.
Good. I'm glad. I love Bumblebee. You know, and Bumblebee's my favorite character. So.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic film. So I'm looking forward to this one. But thanks so much for, taking the time to chat. Really appreciate it.
Nice to talk to you. Where are you calling from, by the way?
I'm in Melbourne.
Oh, okay, good. One of my very, very close friends is there. So I keep trying to see him, but because my wife is from Perth, I seem to skip over Melbourne from Sydney to Perth.
Yeah, so, all the way over there.
You know, yeah.
Not an ugly place, though.
No, boy, how about that? That place is wild.